'Tis the season to scare and torture the innocent. 'Tis the season to haunt and make one question their own sanity. It's Halloween, and as traditions would have it, I will be joining in the festivities by inflicting pain on myself with video game bosses that drive me up the fucking wall. This is Crappy Bosses, Volume 3. Will you make it? You're supposed to go out the first time, you asshole. When people from other countries think of Canada, usually one thought that pops in one's head is that we're a bunch of hockey fanatics. Now, while not every Canadian is a fan of the sport, it is a part of our culture that is usually shocking to others when they find out that it isn't our national sport. But nonetheless, I am sure many vacationers who have come to Canada has quite possibly stopped off to visit the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto to learn a little bit of our supposed culture. But for some, they may have gotten more than they bargained for when they come to find out that this location is actually haunted. In the early 1990s, a few years before the Hockey Hall of Fame moved into the historic building that had been a Bank of Montreal branch for close to 100 years, Toronto musician Joanna Jordan saw a female ghost looking down on her from the second floor ceiling. It is assumed that she had seen the spirit of a young teller known as Dorothy, who had killed herself in the bank sometime between the early 1900s and the 1960s. Many rumors have come up over the years about why Dorothy killed herself, but the most common theory, however, was that she was having an affair with either another teller or the branch manager, a married man who had an apartment in the bank, which unfortunately ended devastatingly. Ever since, there has been countless reports of strange occurrences in the building over the decades that are believed to be connected with Dorothy. Lights flicking on and off, doors and windows opening and closing for no apparent reason, and moans, screams, and other eerie sounds echoing throughout the historic structure. Some staff and employees have heard footsteps when they are working alone at night. A few have even felt a phantom hand on their shoulder or leg. When it comes to licensed games, I think it's safe to say that James Bond is probably the most nostalgic thanks to a certain GoldenEye revolutionizing first-person shooters for consoles. And while I do appreciate what it did for the genre, I also feel that it's highly overrated when compared to other 007 games. Listen, I get it. People spend thousands of hours on its multiplayer to feel those rose-tinted glasses for life. But in my opinion, there was one game that did so many things better than its beloved granddad. I, of course, am talking about Nightfire. Now, I'm not going to get into why I feel Nightfire is the better game. That's for another time. But I can't deny that while I enjoyed GoldenEye, I enjoyed Nightfire a hell of a lot more. This was the one I spent hundreds of hours on. But there's one thing that I do remember about this game being a huge step back from GoldenEye, and that is the final boss. So one of the things I always enjoyed about Nightfire was its range of different locations. From Japan to Austria, each felt very distinct and very memorable, with the last level even taking place in space. The main Bond villain this time around, Raphael Drake, has established himself on a space station with the purpose of sending nukes to blow up on Earth. So of course, Jimmy has to stop this from happening by shooting the missile's locks, I think that's what they are, to make them miss their target, all the while fending off goons who try to stop and kill Mr. Bond. I give this part a lot of credit. There is this tense feeling as you race around the space station to sabotage these missiles, and the space physics are really polished in my opinion. This also goes for the scenery. For the GameCube, this was a really good looking level. The problem is, well, with Drake himself. Once you disable all the missiles, the station starts to malfunction and explode, so he escapes. And at this point you think, oh yeah, we're finally going to throw down laser shots in space and having this huge laser making the things a lot more epic. In fact, no, he just shoots unguided rockets that are easy to dodge, and he goes down in like 4 hits. Talk about a letdown, honestly, because compare this to the fight with Alec on GoldenEye. The entire level is essentially you and him chasing after each other, taking pod shots, and just having a constant struggle to best each other. And Alec was no pushover, so you felt accomplished when you took him out. Drake, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. He does nothing but watch you screw over his plans, and then when he does fight back, he's a total pushover that leaves so much to be desired once you finish the game. It's not a bad boss, well, if you can call it that, it's just a very disappointing one. I might adore and praise Nightfire as the best first-person shooter 007 game, but even I can't look past the final boss like that. Like, seriously, the guy fucking kills himself here. You're just asking to make the list if you pull that crap. A restaurant isn't your typical location for a haunted location, but you'd be surprised at how many will actually have a story to tell. Well, the old spaghetti factory in Vancouver, British Columbia actually has 4 stories of ghosts who supposedly haunt this location. First is of a little girl who appears at the table in the front window and is known to hold a balloon. Once, a friend of the restaurant's general manager had a conversation with her that lasted several minutes. The little girl explained to him that she was looking for her mother. When he returned to the table after telling the manager about her, she disappeared. The second ghost is a small, mischievous spirit with a ruddy face and bright red hair, simply known as the Little Red Man or Looky Loo. He is known to call out the staff members by name and strolls through the kitchen, and his favorite prank is to surprise female customers in the women's washroom. Next is perhaps the old spaghetti factory's most famous ghost, the tram conductor from the number 53 old trolley car that had been installed in the establishment since 1969, and he always appears seated at the same dining table inside the streetcar late at night after closing. Also, place settings are moved by unseen hands, and inexplicable cold spots are experienced inside the car. But perhaps the most terrifying ghostly inhabitant is of a young boy named Edward. According to a former waitress, she was in the back section of the restaurant helping to close up for the night. While she was busy resetting some tables, a boy ran past her towards the back. With it being so late and no customers left in the restaurant, she thought it was strange that a boy was running around, so she followed him. The boy ran under a table alongside the back wall, turned around and looked up at her. When she looked at his face, she saw that his eye sockets were empty. I think it's easy to see why she is a former waitress.
The Donkey Kong Country series is easily considered to be some of the best set of platformers ever. From its beautiful graphics to the top-notch gameplay with a difficulty curve that becomes brutal but never cheap, it's easy to see why these video games, especially the original trilogy, is so beloved. Even to this day, I still can't properly decide if I like 2 or 3 better, and I think I've just come to accept that I like both equally. But even the best games aren't perfect, and DK is not exempt from this. Now when it comes to bosses, this is usually regarded as one of the highlights. They are creative, challenging, and rewarding when you do beat one. Well, for 2 onwards. DKC1 can be viewed as lazy and unoriginal since they are just enlarged enemies with basic patterns. But to pick any of them would be a cop-out in my opinion, and I like the idea of challenging my viewers a little bit more than just the obvious. But there's one boss from this series I dread having to face every time I do. Not because it's difficult, because its only way for it to be challenging is for it to be cheap. So say what you want about Donkey Kong Country 3, whether or not you think it's a step back from Diddy's Conquest. If there's one thing I think most will agree on, is that DKC3 has some of the most creative boss fights in the entire series. From making a barrel burp himself into a bottomless pit to having a snowball fight with Frosty's crackhead cousin. These truly are some of the most creative fights you would see out of Nintendo platformers of the era. But creative doesn't always mean fun, and this boss fight against Squirt is easily my least favorite fight throughout the entire Donkey Kong Country series. Like I mentioned, the problem with this fight isn't that it's hard. All you do is squirt in the eyes as he tries to knock you off the ledge with his water shots, and oh, how I would love to capitalize on a Splooge joke, but I'll save that for... Nah, let's screw it and squirt on Squirt's face. Oh, such a kid-friendly game. Only on Nintendo consoles can you make a cum joke and make it sound so fucking funny. Cause it's so out of place! I'm fucked. Now that I've lost subscribers and some people's lunch, this boss fight is actually one of the easiest fights in the game, but it's made much more difficult than it has any right to be because of one stupid-ass issue. It's way too easy to fall off a ledge. Now granted, that's how Squirt attempts to kill you is by knocking you off the ledges with the water he spits at you. The problem is that the ledges are so slippery. Every time I come back to this game and face this boss, I'm usually screaming because I fell off by accident. If Squirt knocked me off, then that's one thing, the game got me like it was intended to do. But it's pretty sad that I've lost more lives to a slippery edge of a ledge than the actual boss fight being my demise. It's not fun, and this is why Squirt is such a crappy boss.
War can be hell on Earth, even if the battle is a quick one that lasts about only 15 minutes, which is exactly how the Battle of Abraham lasted. But despite this, over 1,000 lives were lost. Even though the battle involved less than 10,000 soldiers on both sides, its importance in the 7 Years' War was very high, and winning it made the British's grip on Canada even stronger. The Canadian militia fighting for the French were pushed back further into the country, and the battle was a key factor in winning the land and stopped the creation of New France, and forever reserving the country to be known as Canada. The whole area of the Plains of Abraham is now a historical landmark and tourist attraction that is thought to be haunted, with it being considered by many to be the most haunted place in Quebec. The field itself is home to a number of apparitions who seem to appear mostly around midday, which is when the battle was fought. Every kind of sighting from a single soldier to a whole line of ghostly troops has been reported, with soldiers from the British, French, and militia forces being seen. A hot spot of the Plains of Abraham are the tunnels. Within them, one of the most common claims is a strong smell of spent gunpowder, though a source can never be found. People have also claimed to be touched in these tunnels, such as hair being brushed, and even some claiming to have even been barged past by an unseen soldier, almost knocking them to the ground.
Oh, Color Splash, you never had a chance. That first reveal trailer screwed you from the very beginning. Looking like Sticker Star 2.0 didn't do you any favors. Did me one though in gaining some new followers, so thank you! But in all seriousness though, Color Splash in its own right wasn't a bad game. I'm glad I got to experience it for what it was, as I do feel this is what Sticker Star was supposed to be. But it's a game that I don't ever see myself returning to unless it's for this channel. Definitely a one and done kind of game in my opinion, especially since there are some things I never want to re-experience ever again, and that is the Koopalings boss fights. I am definitely in the camp of not liking Sticker Star. It dumbed down so many aspects that made the original two Paper Mario games so memorable, and changed the gameplay in a way that I wasn't a big fan of. Now, as I mentioned, I do think Color Splash was a huge improvement over Sticker Star, except in one department, which is the fights against the bosses, and you know it's pretty bad when you do something worse than Sticker Star. So anyone who's played knows that the Koopalings each have a unique and pretty creative boss fight at the end of each main chapter. Could be fighting Iggy in a coliseum on chariots, to Ludwig on a half-finished battleship. But they fucked it all up by making it where you need a certain thing card to defeat each of them or else you don't fucking win. And that reason alone is why this is on the fucking goddamn list. I despise this aspect so much that because it's so goddamn cheap. Honestly, I compare this to the pay-to-win microtransaction formula. No real skill or challenge, just jump and hammer the little pricks without any thought put into it and then use a thing card at the right time to win or else you automatically lose. That's fucking bullshit. Like, who thought this would be a good idea? Now, I know some may say, well, part of the fun is trying to figure out how and when to use these thing cards, basically turning these fights into a puzzle. And I say sorry, but get the hell out of here, cause you're wrong. You're wrong. You're just wrong. You're wrong. So much goddamn wrong. You're wrong. I get my fill out of the puzzles the stages gave me. Exploring this paper world and figuring out its secrets is fun, but keep that in the overworld. When I'm in battle, I just want to put my skills to the test and see if I'm ready to beat the next challenge. This is why I bring up Sticker Star, because while that game did something similar where if you use a specific sticker you can make the boss fight a lot easier, you still had to actually put in an effort into defeating them since they could still take you out if you were not prepared. And the worst part about all of this is, if they didn't rely on this stupid gimmick, these easily would have been some of the best boss fights we have ever seen in the Paper Mario series. And I think that's what burns me the most.
Mackenzie Hall hits home a little bit for me, as this is located in my hometown of Windsor, Ontario, and is considered by many to quite possibly be the most haunted location in Detroit's border city. Which, when you consider the building's history, it's not that hard to see why, since Mackenzie Hall has been a courthouse, a jail, and gallows when the area was still just Sandwich Town. So you can imagine it's had its fair share of bloodshed and has been a location of many hangings, with the first taking place as early as April 2nd, 1862. Creepy fact, a number of those executed were buried outside the hall, under what is now the modern-day parking lot. Nothing like disrespecting the dead, eh? In terms of ghostly activity, perhaps the most well-known is the Dragon Ghost. A custodian had been working late one night and was hanging lights up in the gallery. When this person went downstairs, he heard the ladder scraping across the floor, even though he was locked securely in the building and was the only one there. The ladder moved 3 times before he fled the building in fear. Several other people have seen things such as drinks moving across the table to large pieces of furniture moving on their own. Is it the executed seeking revenge? Or perhaps a former patron who has just spawned the building and wants to be heard during its many wedding receptions? You decide.
It's only been a few months since I talked about Rayman 2, but anyone who's watched that episode already knows where I'm going with this, because I'm still bitter over it and I want to bitch some more. So I won't get into too much of the build-up and just get straight to it. The game forces you to ride this thing called a flying shell for the last section of the game before you face off against Admiral Razorbeard. As you can imagine, the controls on this thing are hard as shit and it can take a hell of a long time before you get the hang of it. Which don't worry your little head about, because you're going to spend more than enough time to get used to the new control scheme. So once you do finally conquer that section, you make it to the top of Razorbeard's ship, and now it's a one-on-one deathmatch against Rayman and the Grolgoth. At this point it seems fine. Dodge his attacks and send his bombs back at him to damage him. A little on the easy side though, to be fair, the fight is just getting started. But after you shave off about 1/5 of his health, a cutscene happens where it shows Razorbeard's Grolgoth has damaged the battlefield and both he and Rayman plummet to their supposed doom. Of course we know that this surely can't be the end of it, but then something horrible happens. Something cruel and evil. Yeah, we get to ride this stupid fucking flying shell again, which now includes doing U-turns and dodging rockets and tight squeezes when the lava rises, all the while having to do a perfect run. Cause if you get hit or you crash into a wall or become unable to dodge the lava with its beyond bullshit difficult controls, well, you get to start from the very fucking beginning. This is not fun. This is total fuckhead mode. Who the hell thought this was a good idea? Like seriously. I mean, there are games out there that have similar situations where the final boss has the gimmick of you not being able to be hit once or you die. Sonic 2 is a prime example of that type of mechanic. But the difference between Rayman 2 and Sonic 2 is the fact that you still control Sonic normally, and its difficulty is based on the skill you developed throughout the entire game. This is not the case for Rayman 2. All this is just a stupid gameplay gimmick they included at the end of the game that completely turns the game on its head. Which even after you finally get a handle of the weird control of the flying shell, it throws you for another loop because now you have to learn combat with this fucking thing. If the final boss for Rayman was just a section before they both fell with the difficulty ramping up as Razorbeard's health depleted, then that would have been perfect. But you know what's the biggest middle finger about this final boss? It's the fact that the PS1 version's final boss, while still on the flying shell, is set up like a space shooter and controls normally. And you know what the sad part is? It's fun and challenging for all the right reasons. What the hell happened, N64? Talk about dropping the ball at the very end and missing that touchdown to win the game. You dumbasses.
I've had the pleasure of visiting the Banff Springs Hotel a few times during the 7 years I lived in Alberta. It truly is a beautiful and luxurious hotel, set deep in the mountains with Lake Louise right by it to make it the perfect getaway and vacation spot. If I ever have the chance to live and work in Banff, I wouldn't pass it up. But just like any location, it has its fair share of history, as well as some notable ghostly phenomenon linked to it. Perhaps the most famous haunting is the Ghost Bride that dates back as far back as the 1920s. In fact, she is so famous that there has been stamps and coins dedicated to her honor. Her tragic story is that on her wedding day, the bride descended one of the hotel's marble staircases. Unfortunately, something startled her, causing her to slip and fall. Some say she caught her heel on the hem of her dress. Others say her dress brushed up against a candle's flame. Whatever the cause, the end result is that the bride died on those steps. Since then, hotel staff and guests have reported seeing a veiled figure moving up and down the stairs, or seen a figure in a wedding dress dancing in the ballroom upstairs, longing for the first dance with her husband that she never got to have. Another known spirit connected to the hotel is Sam the Bellman. Sam McCauley was head bellman during the 60s and 70s and has been seen around since his passing in 1975. Sam is a helpful sort of spirit, and most stories involving him mention services he's provided the staff or guests. One incident involved two women calling the bell desk for assistance after they found their key wouldn't work in their door. The regular bellman was occupied with other duties and didn't respond for 15 minutes. By the time he arrived to their room, it was unlocked. One of the women said an older bellman in a plaid jacket helped them into their room, matching Sam's description exactly. Lastly is the infamous room 873. Linked to this room was an entire family being tragically murdered here, and ever since, guests in the room have reported being awoken by screaming noises. Whenever a guest would turn on the lights, they would see bloody handprints on the mirror. Either the handprints would disappear before employees had a chance to clean them, or it wouldn't come off at all. In fact, many visitors who check out the 8th floor of the hotel will notice that 873 has been completely covered up, and no one can access the room anymore, perhaps for our safety and sanity as well.
You know, doing these yearly crappy bosses episodes, I've surprisingly only had two bosses where it made me think, how the hell did I overlook such an obvious pick? The first one was Twin Freaks from last year's episode. This one was more of a why didn't I pick in my first year since Heady was the first game I ever did a video on, but it made the list sooner or later, so no harm done. But this pick, it honestly made me feel like I was losing it, cause how could I have picked the Globe Holder over the Vortex Queen? Like seriously, the Vortex Queen has to be one of the most trolling bosses in video game history. But let's set the stage again, shall we? Echo has finally made it to the Vortex's lair. You've braved the tube, then spent countless hours of trial and error, trying to navigate Echo's most infamous level.
You see? It's been 3 fucking years and I still can't get the fuck out of this fucking level. Fuck this. And fuck that. No, wait, no. The song's actually pretty good.
But then you finally pull it off. You finally conquer that auto-scrolling level from hell. And once you do, you get thrown right into the Vortex Queen's chamber and one of two things happen. A, you get sideswiped by the Vortex drones who drain your health instantly and you die. Or B, you actually make it to the Vortex drone trying to figure out what the hell you're supposed to do. Then chances are you get eaten because this is the first time you witness her and surely you're not going to figure it out on your first go. I mean, it's only natural you're going to die the first time around in a game as brutally difficult as Echo the Dolphin. But either way, something horrible happens. Something that, in my opinion, is one of the biggest fuck yous in video games. In either scenario, if you die, you're sent back to the machine, one level prior. Oh, joyous day. I get to play the motherfucking machine for another goddamn day. And who the hell thought it was okay to do this? There is no goddamn way that you're gonna know how to properly damage her at first since there's no obvious weak points until you experiment with the sonar. And to be fair, it's actually a pretty creative boss fight that is actually pretty brutal in how you attack her. Echo doesn't just defeat her, he fucking mutilates the son of a bitch. Shoots her eyes out, then breaks her jaw 3 times. Then when she's completely defenseless, he slams into the top of her head and attempts to crack her skull open. Though I don't blame Echo for this sadistic treatment. Look what the hell he had to go through. Over and over and over and over again and again and again. So yeah, maybe it's a cop-out that the Vortex Queen is #1 this year since the fight itself is actually kind of fun, creative, and challenging. But to put in such a bullshit gimmick where it's do or die that makes you redo the 5 to 10 minute level all over again, and it's gonna happen since you're gonna die a lot? Yeah. That's more than enough reason for this to be #1. Like seriously, anyone who claims they beat this on their first try blind, much like it's sending you back to the machine, bullshit.
God, I never want to relive any previous content for a long ass time. That was like, ugh. Fucking hell.
Oh, your past haunting you is far from